Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nicholas Bulens. I am a program administrator at the Executive Office of Economic Development. And in this video, I'll be presenting on regional equipment grants, which are currently available through the fiscal year 26 round of the Massachusetts Dredging Program. This is a pre-recorded information session, so thank you for tuning in and for your interest in the program. The purpose of this video is to provide a walkthrough of the current round's RFP information, specifically its Appendix A. I'll go over the agenda in just a moment, but I have two quick housekeeping items. First, a copy of this slide deck is available on Combis. Please feel welcome to download it at any time. Second, because this is not a live recording, there is no Q&A portion to the presentation. However, the round has an open Q&A period during which any person can submit written questions. Responses will be publicly posted on Combis. Following the close of the Q&A period, I'll provide more details on the logistics for this at the end of the presentation. Let's dive in. Here's our agenda for today's video. We'll start with an overview of equipment grants in the fiscal year 26 round, including program background and general ABCs. Next, we'll talk about core requirements, followed by a walkthrough of the application process. We'll discuss the review process as well as the criteria used to evaluate equipment applications. Finally, I'll offer some helpful tips for applying and detail the written Q&A process. Now, two disclaimers. First, this presentation is not a substitute for reading the RFP. We'll cover the highlights of the fiscal year 26 round for equipment projects, but we won't cover every nook and cranny. So for full details, please consult the RFP, namely its Appendix A. Second, this is the first occasion when regional equipment grants are being offered alongside our traditional construction grants. For this reason, we are releasing two pre-recorded information sessions. This recording that you're listening to now is intended for dredging equipment applicants only. It's important that you consult the correct video because the general requirements submitting an application and award and evaluation information for equipment grants are distinct and provided for in Appendix A of the RFP. This video walks you through that appendix. In the event of any conflict or discrepancy between this presentation and the RFP, the latter will control. The Mass Dredging Program is a standalone capital grant program launched in 2019. It is the first and still the only grant program in the Commonwealth to offer focused funding for saltwater dredging. It offers this funding on an open, predictable, and competitive basis. The overarching goal of the program is to respond to local dredging needs that strengthen the Commonwealth's blue economy. Blue economy is partly a term of art, but for our purposes, we take a broad view of the topic. We define the blue economy as encompassing not just ocean-based commercial activities, such as fisheries and transportation, but quality of life activities like coastal recreation and tourism, as well as what communities need to make these activities possible, namely safe and healthy harbors. These are the basics, what and how, of equipment grants for the fiscal year 26 round. What's eligible? Grants are available for the purchase of regional equipment used in the delivery of saltwater dredging services to two or more coastal municipalities. How will awards be made? Equipment grants will be competitively awarded with a focus on new purchases that will increase regional capabilities and support the economic vitality and coastal resources of Massachusetts harbors. The basics. EOED will consider up to $500,000 in awards for equipment purchases in the current grant round. All Massachusetts coastal municipalities are eligible to apply, as well as any public commissions representing two or more of these municipalities, including county commissions. Reviews will focus on regional strength and needs in three areas of the blue economy: commercial fishing, tourism, and coastal resources. Match requirement and performance period. Per the program's authorizing legislation, projects require a 1-to-1 cost share or a 50% match to be considered for funding. This match must consist of non-state funds, but those funds may come from multiple non-state sources, such as municipal bonds, federal grants, or private contributions. Very important, in-kind contributions and pre-grant contract costs are not eligible as matching funds. The applicant's match must be a cash equivalent comprised of non-state dollars. All equipment must be purchased by June 30th, 2026. The key word here is purchased. By purchase, we mean that on or before June 30th, the award was placed and PO documents were issued consistent with public procurement requirements. Equipment not delivered by June 30th is still eligible for cost reimbursement, provided the equipment was purchased on time. Eligible equipment. Regional dredging equipment is defined as tangible property, including technology systems that meet two criteria. One, the property is critical to and will primarily be used for the delivery of saltwater dredging services to no less than two coastal municipalities. And two, the property has a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit acquisition cost which equals or exceeds the lesser of the capitalization level established by the public entity or financial statement purposes, or $250. In most cases, I think $250 is going to be the lesser of the two for public entities. This slide shows examples of eligible equipment, assuming they meet that 250 per unit mark. This is not an inclusive list. Its purpose is to provide examples only. However, you can see from the slide that the type of equipment really runs the gamut from surveying equipment and GPS positioning systems to new vessels, heavy machinery, and actual dredgers. The anticipated start date for contracts awarded in the fiscal year 26 round is August 1st. EOED may place conditions on any award commitment and require that these conditions be satisfied prior to contracting. All contracts will incorporate the terms and conditions of the RFP and associated appendices, any amendments thereto, and the grantee's commitment letter and any conditions therein. Lastly, for this slide, EOED may hold a minimum of 5% of any award as retainage until the project is complete. The deadline. Applications must be submitted by March 21st, 2025, 11:59 p.m. Applications must be submitted online via EOED's submittable platform. So this is an online grant management platform with a login. No late submissions will be accepted. No email, paper, or fax submissions will be accepted. For preparation, municipalities can preview and download a copy of the application in Microsoft Word format on Combis. We highly recommend that you consult it. However, this copy is offered as a reference and preparation resource only. No submission of a Word document will be accepted as a formal application. The application is divided into 6 substantive sections. The project snapshot. This is exactly what it sounds like, a quick snapshot of what's being requested. Regional profile and capabilities. Here you describe the characteristics of the service region, as well as the public entity's existing or planned dredging operations. Project profile. This section deals with your project scope and need. Cost and funding sources. This is mostly a cost summary table where you itemize your equipment. It also covers your match commitment, target milestones, and any recent purchases of equipment if that's applicable. Promoting the blue economy. This is your most substantive section. It's comprised of two subsections, each of which corresponds to one or more areas of the blue economy. So these include commercial fishing and tourism and coastal resources. In each subsection, you'll detail the strength and needs of the region in that particular area of the blue economy. Preparing for success, this section deals first with the readiness of the region's municipalities to actually use dredging services. And second, the public entity's plans for sustaining these services in future years. Lastly, for this slide, attachments. Every applicant is required to submit documentation that supports your estimated equipment costs. So this includes price listing, vendor quotes, bids, or similar. The submittable online application platform. So all projects must be submitted using EOED's submittable platform, which is a 100% online application process. First thing to note is that each submitter or the person that's entering the application needs to create a personal user account. This slide provides some screenshots of that process. You'll find the submittable link on the Dredging program's How to Apply page. From there, look for the Submit button with the title Mass Dredging Program Fiscal Year 26 Regional Equipment Grants. Make sure you click on the form that says Regional Equipment Grants and not Construction Grants. You'll be prompted to sign in. If you're a new user, click Sign Up. And if you forgot your password, you can click Forgot and follow the on-screen instructions. Once signed in, you'll be asked a yes or no pre-check question just to confirm that you're applying for an equipment grant. Once you're past the pre-check, you will have officially started your application and you can save and return at any time. Sorry about that. Prepare and submit. Here are some high-level steps for submitting an application. I'm not going to read each of them, but I will call out step 1. Be sure you start at COMBIZE and review all the documents available there. For equipment grants, your most critical document is the Appendix A. Again, the general requirements, submitting an application, and award and evaluation information for equipment grants are distinct, and all of this information is provided for in Appendix A. A few note about the mechanics of the online application. Some questions are conditional. They'll appear only if you select yes, no, or some specific answer, so read and consider your responses carefully. Additionally, watch for options that say select all that apply. Those selections matter. Throughout the application, you'll see icons that call out important details and guidance about what to include in your responses. Read these very carefully as well. You'll also encounter several tables. All of these will auto-calculate as necessary. Lastly, most text boxes allowed rich text editing, which means bullet points and other functions are available. Feel welcome to use them. Also, most text boxes will automatically expand so you can see all your text at once. Award decisions. Applications will be evaluated based on the criteria and considerations specified in the RFP's Appendix A. The review panel will consider and may recommend up to $500,000 in equipment awards, subject to secretarial approval and ratification by the governor and lieutenant governor. EOED anticipates emailing decision notifications by mid-June. Any award will be contingent on the successful execution of a grant contract. This contract again will incorporate all conditions of the RFP and associated appendices, the grantee's commitment letter, as well as any conditions therein. Now I'll walk you through the evaluation criteria for equipment grants. Very important. This presentation covers most, but not necessarily all evaluation criteria for these grants. So please consult the Appendix A for full details. Additionally, please note that these are evaluation criteria, not eligibility criteria. In other words, these are factors that the review panel will assess and weigh as part of the competitive evaluation process, but applicants are not required to meet these criteria to be eligible for consideration. The first set of criteria on the screen applies to Section 2 of the application. The review panel will consider the following: whether the service region includes a designated port area, as well as how many How many communities qualify as rural or small towns? We'll consider the overall size and scope of the region based on the number of municipalities and harbors present, the number of U.S. Coast Guard stations, and the distribution and variety of public access points in the region, namely the number of municipalities with public boat ramps, state and local beaches, and the trail or harbor walks. Additionally, we'll consider the number of EJ communities in the region and the percentage population that resides in EJ census block groups. EJ represents environmental justice. Lastly, for this slide, we'll consider the region's median EQV per capita. So EQV per capita stands for Equalized Valuation per Capita. It basically represents a municipality's total real estate value divided by its population, and Mass DOR calculates this value for each city and town in Massachusetts. For equipment projects, which are regional, we're going to take the median EQV per capita across all the municipalities, and that's what we consider in evaluations. So the criteria discussed in the previous slide dealt with characteristics of the region as a whole. This slide deals with the public entity's own characteristics. So if you currently provide dredging services, you'll be asked to describe your own operations, and the review panel will consider the strength of those operations based on your existing inventory of equipment, management and staffing, and how easily municipalities can access your services. Alternatively, if the public entity is new to the dredging game and does not currently provide services, then the review panel will consider the strength of your startup planning. This means considering any due diligence performed to date, such as a feasibility study, how well the public entity understands its own startup costs and inventory needs, the public entity's management and staffing plan, and finally, how easily municipalities will have access to dredging services once they're started. Project profile. The review panel will consider the purchase of any large equipment as part of the project, and by large equipment, we mean one or more of the following: dredgers, push boats, barges, dump scows, cranes, excavators, skid loaders, or other heavy construction machinery. We'll consider whether any purchases are for new equipment not yet owned by the public entity as compared to equipment currently in its inventory. Lastly, for this slide, we'll consider the strength of any new, improved, or sustained capabilities generated by the purchases. In other words, this is where you'll explain to EOED exactly what the equipment will do for you and your operations and how it will help you better service the region. Cost and funding sources. The review panel will consider the clarity and completeness of the public entity's cost summary and its estimates. An important component of your cost summary is the itemization of your purchases, so be sure to read the instructions before completing the cost table in the application. The review panel will consider whether the public entity's match is secured and whether the amount of that match equals or exceeds 55%. That is, whether the match goes above and beyond the program's minimum. We'll consider whether the public entity has spent $2,500 or more of its own funds on purchases of dredging equipment over the last 3 fiscal years, including the current fiscal year. And lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider whether the public entity has previously received a mass dredging program grant for regional equipment. As previously noted, Section 5 of the application is your most substantive. It deals with benefits across 3 areas of the blue economy: commercial fishing, tourism, and coastal resources. The important thing to note here is the message that you see at the bottom. While projects strong in multiple areas will generally be more competitive, projects are not required to excel in all or any minimum number of areas to be considered. For commercial fishing and tourism, the review panel will consider the following: the economic strength of commercial fishing, lobstering, or shell fishing in the region based on the variety of those activities and their magnitude of outcome in the region. Additionally, we'll consider the strength of the region's commercial boating activities based on the number of municipalities supporting ferry services, whale watches, and cargo shipping. And lastly, for this slide, we'll consider the economic strength of the travel and tourism industry in the region, and that will be based on the magnitude of outcomes and the variety of destinations demonstrated by the public entity to be in the region. For coastal resources, the review panel will consider whether coastal wetlands degradation or coastal erosion were identified as top natural environment impacts in the Commonwealth's climate change assessment. That's a mouthful, but this is not something that applicants need to look up. The review panel will find the information itself. The review panel will also consider whether the public entity can provide beneficial use of dredged material, and if so, what the anticipated demand for those services may be in the future. If unable to provide beneficial use, then the public entity can explain if and how dredging services will generate any ecosystem benefits for the region, and if so, how strongly these benefits are needed. What you'll see in the application is a list of 5 types of ecosystem benefits, and from this, you'll select all that apply and then provide explanation. And again, this is only for applicants that are unable to provide beneficial use as part of their dredging services. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider the number of harbors in the region that are listed on Mass DEP's 2022 list of impaired waters for the Clean Water Act. Applicants will need to look up this information, but the application provides detail and instructions on how to do this. The last section of the application is preparing for success. Here the review panel will consider the following: the number of municipalities with existing dredging permits in the service region, the anticipated demand for dredging services in the next 2 fiscal years, not including the current fiscal year, and lastly, the public entity's capacity to maintain and replace equipment in future years. This assessment is based on 3 factors. 1, the average useful life of the equipment to be purchased. 2, any planning processes current in place for the maintenance or replacement of equipment by the public entity, such as an annual capital improvement planning process. And 3, any anticipated funding sources for ongoing maintenance and replacement. Helpful tips. For every round, I like to offer tips that can help maximize the competitiveness of your application. First, complete all sections to the extent applicable. We just can't evaluate what you don't answer. Respond completely to each question. Sometimes it can feel that you're repeating information, but that can be okay if doing so is what's needed to answer a question completely. To that end, be sure to read all questions carefully and look for guidance about what to include in your responses. We try to be helpful in our instructions. Lastly, not all statements speak for themselves. So when asked and when feasible, support your statements with examples, numbers, or information from professional reports that you may already have. In previous rounds, applications asked where they could find data and information on the blue economy. This was a really great question, and our sister secretariats have published a variety of reports on the blue economy. To assist, the RFP provides links to as many of these resources as I could find. They provide harbor maps, fisheries and aquacultural data, coast guides, travel and tourism information, and more. Several of these resources are linked here on the slide, but a complete list is available in Appendix A of the RFP. All references to resources are provided for information purposes and to assist applications in preparation of their submissions, so please feel welcome to utilize them. All right, the written Q&A process. General questions regarding the RFP will be accepted via electronic mail through February 21st, 2025, 11:59 p.m. Send questions to EOHED grants at mass.gov with subject line dredging RFP. Note that in the email address there is an H, so it's EOHED grants. EOED will respond only to general questions and reserves the right not to respond to any or all questions. Formal responses will be posted on Combis. Similar questions may be aggregated and answered as a single response. With all that said, we are at the end of our presentation. Thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to reading this year's applications.